I always knew that Mom loved my sister Lauren more. It wasn't a secret. It was like the air in our family that everyone breathed, but no one spoke out loud. Lauren was her star, her pride, her perfect project. Mom praised her in front of everyone. Lauren is so smart, she's already married. Lauren always knows what she wants. Even when Lauren was throwing tantrums or snapping at everyone, Mom would close her eyes, smile and say, "She's just emotional, that's her strength." What about me? I was a shadow, an eternal disappointment. "Be a man," she hissed when I tried to talk about my problems. "You're so boring," she'd add if I wasn't jumping at her jokes. "Lauren is already married and you're still a winner," she would say, as if I were her personal mistake that needed to be fixed. But when she uploaded my voicemails to the family chat, it wasn't just a rebuke. It was a punch in the gut, designed to make the whole family see how weak I am. She captioned them, "That's why Lauren has always been stronger." And I sent it to a chat where there were aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandma, as if I were an exhibit in a circus of freaks. I thought the family chat was just a dump for photos from feasts, where grandma shows off her dumplings and Aunt Linda posts selfies with a new filter. A place where everyone pretends they don't care about each other, throwing emoticons and arguing over whose potatoes taste better. I was in the background of this chat. I liked it, sometimes I wrote cool, but mostly I was silent so as not to get into their fight for the throne of the most successful. I liked being invisible, but Mom decided that invisibility was too soft. She wanted everyone to see me, naked, vulnerable, crushed. I sent those voicemails to my best friend, Jack, at 2 in the morning, when the world seemed like a black hole. I was talking about breaking up with a girl who dumped me for a more stable boyfriend. "Jack, I'm not sure what to do next." My voice cracked like a teenager's. "I'm afraid that I'll be alone, that I'll always be alone." I poured everything out. How painful, how ashamed, how I hate myself for not being able to just pull myself together. Those were the words I trusted him with because he knew how to listen, not judge. I didn't know that Jack had forwarded them to my mom, thinking that she would support him. Instead, she threw them into the chat like a grenade and added her venom. "That's why Lauren has always been stronger." I saw the message in the morning when the phone vibrated as if it was being tortured. I opened the chat and the world froze. My voicemails were lying there like an eviscerated corpse, and my mom's comment was like a plaque on a grave. "That's why Lauren has always been stronger." I pressed play and my voice, weak, trembling, filled the room. "I'm afraid to be alone. I do not know how to proceed." Every word was like a punch in the face. I turned off my phone, but it was too late. The chat had already exploded. Aunt Linda sent an eye-rolling emoji, her signature gesture when she wants to say "you're pathetic," without unnecessary words. Cousin Tyler posted a gif of a crying baby. Uncle Rick wrote, "Men don't whine, pull yourself together." Grandma, who used to spam with cat stickers, was silent, and her silence was worse than screaming. Dad said, "We'll talk later." And Lauren, my perfect sister, threw a sticker with a clown on it, as if I were a buffoon she ordered for her holiday. I sat staring at the screen and felt shame and rage fighting inside, as if someone had turned out my guts and put them in a showcase. Friends, how do you like Mom's action? Is it just favoritism or something more violent? Write in the comments. Have you ever come across such a comparison in your family? Subscribe to find out what's next. Mom didn't write sorry. She didn't call. I haven't deleted my voice messages. She just continued to post in the chat as if nothing had happened. "Linda, how's your pie? Grandma, when's tea time?" I looked at her messages and every emoji was like spit. She didn't just leak my words. She wanted everyone to see how weak I was compared to Lauren. I remembered how she always put her sister on a pedestal. Lauren would be late for the family dinner, and her mom would say, "She's busy, she's got a career." I was late and I heard, "You're ruining everything again." Lauren dropped out of college and Mom said, "She'll find her way." I failed the exam and got, "You're a disgrace to the family." It wasn't just a preference, it was a system where Lauren was the sun and I was the shadow that was supposed to shade her. And now Mom has shown everyone that I'm not just a shadow. I'm an empty place that shouldn't be pitted. I wrote to her in the personal account, "Why did you do this?" The reply came an hour later, cold as ice. "Don't be so sensitive. The family needs to know who you are." I reread her words and rage boiled up in me like lava. "Know who I am?" She didn't want them to know me, but her version of me, the winner, the loser, the anti-Lauren. It wasn't a mistake. It was an attack, planned and precise like a sniper's shot. She wanted me to break, to bend, as always. But I was no longer the son who kept quiet so as not to upset her. I felt like something inside me clicked, as if someone had turned a key in a lock. If she wanted war, I was ready. Not for revenge, but for myself. Friends, what do you think about the hero's reaction? Should he have written to his mom, or was it better to keep quiet? Write in the comments, how would you respond to such betrayal? Share our story with your friends. The chat didn't stop all day. Aunt Linda wrote, maybe he should see a psychologist? This is not normal. Her words were like a prick disguised as caring. Tyler added another gif. When your voicemails are a whole podcast about sadness. Uncle Rick continued, in our day we just walked and worked. Their messages were like darts, not lethal but sharp enough to leave a mark. Grandma finally wrote, don't hold a grudge, honey. Mom's worried. I chuckled as I read her words. Worried? Mom wasn't worried, she was judging. She wanted everyone to see how problematic I was, so that her own cracks would remain in the shadows. Dad was silent, and his silence was like a knife that he didn't pull out, but he didn't stick in either. I knew he wouldn't argue with Mom. He never argued, even when she was wrong. I was scrolling through the chat, and every comment, every sticker was like a punch. I felt like a piece of meat that had been thrown for a laugh, and my family, instead of helping, was poking at me with sticks. It wasn't just humiliation. It was a show where I played the role of a victim, and my mother was the director. I remembered how she always smiled when she was praised for her perfect family. Lauren is so smart, she said, and about me she added, he's trying, but... Now she's shown everyone that I'm not trying, I'm not coping, I'm not worthy. And at that moment I realized Mom is not just a mom. She's a person who benefits from me being weak, for Lauren to shine brighter, for her own sins to remain in the shadows. Friends, how do you like the behavior of the family? Were their stickers and comments just jokes? Or was it complicity and betrayal? Write in the comments, how would you react to this in your chat? Support our podcast to find out what's next. I closed the phone and lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The shame was like a stranglehold, but the rage was stronger. I didn't want to be the one who could be crushed by a single message. I didn't want to be the one Mom was using to elevate Lauren. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew one thing. This wasn't the end. She wanted to make me look weak, but I was going to show that weakness wasn't my vocal cords. Weakness is hiding your sins behind someone else's pain. And I was ready to find her sins so that she could feel what it was like to be naked in front of everyone. Friends, what do you think about the hero's decision not to give up? Is this the beginning of a struggle or the road to conflict? Write in the comments, how would you start looking for your truth? Subscribe so you don't miss the sequel. After my mom leaked my voicemails to the family chat, everything became different. The chat didn't die, but it turned into some kind of sinister arena where every smiley face, every meme was like a punch in the gut. My words, my most painful, most honest words about parting, about the fear of loneliness, became their toy. Lauren, my sister, threw a clown sticker, as if I were a buffoon she hired for her show. Uncle Rick wrote, "You're such a crybaby." And I felt his words cutting like a rusty knife. Aunt Linda sent a gif with rolling eyes, Tyler was spamming memes, and Grandma was silent, which was worse than their ridicule. Mom? She didn't explain, didn't apologize, didn't delete the voicemails. She just watched as the family turned me into a meme, as if it was her plan from the very beginning. I wrote to her personally and asked her to remove the notes, but her response was like a slap in the face. Don't be so sensitive. The family should know who they are dealing with. Then I understood. This is not an accident. It was an attack, and I wasn't just a victim. I became a family laughingstock that you can kick until you get tired of it. The chat was bubbling all day like a pot of poison. Lauren, who has always been Mom's princess, didn't stop at the clown sticker. She sent another one, a gif with a crying baby and the caption, "When your brother is a drama queen." I looked at her messages and every pixel was like a prick. Lauren never missed a chance to remind herself that she was better. She was married, with perfect hair and a perfect life, which her mother held up as a trophy. What about me? I was a winner who didn't live up to expectations. Aunt Linda wrote, "Maybe he really needs to see a psychologist?" It's not normal to ship like this. Her words were like a prick disguised as caring. Tyler, my cousin, added a meme. Voice calls are when no one ordered your podcast. Uncle Rick continued. In our day, we just walked and worked, not whined into the microphone. Their taunts were like darts. Each one wasn't fatal, but together they left me bleeding. Dad was silent. His "we'll talk later" remained an empty promise. Grandma wrote, "Don't hold it against me, honey. Mom's worried." I chuckled as I read her words. Worried? Mom wasn't worried. She directed this show where I was the main clown. Friends, what do you think about the family's reaction? Is this just a joke or complicity in Mom's attack? Write in the comments. Have you ever encountered such humor in your family? Subscribe to find out what's next. I was trying to figure out why they all picked up on her game. Lauren was easy. She was always my mom's favorite, and my voicemails only confirmed her status as strong. Aunt Linda, who loved gossip, just enjoyed the drama as a spectator in the front row. Tyler, who always pretended to be cool, saw me as an easy target. Uncle Rick, with his masculine standards, believed that my feelings were a weakness that needed to be ridiculed. Grandma was silent because she didn't want to quarrel with Mom. And Dad? His silence was the hardest. I waited for him to call and say, "This is wrong." But he just disappeared, as if my voicemails weren't his problem, but my mom's victory. I remembered how he always kept quiet when my mom compared me to Lauren. "She's a star," he said when Lauren showed off her new ring. And about me? He will find his way. Now I saw that his path was a shadow in which I had to stay. I wrote to my mom in the personal account. Delete voice messages. It's personal. My finger was shaking when I pressed send. I was hoping that she would come to her senses, that she would say I'm sorry, that it was a mistake. But her response was like a whip. Don't be so sensitive. The family should know who they are dealing with. I reread her words, and the rage in me ignited like a fire. Know who he's dealing with? She didn't want them to know me, but her version of me weak, pathetic, unworthy of her perfect Lauren. It wasn't a mistake, but an attack planned with cold precision. She wanted me to break down, to bend over as always, so that her show would continue without interference. But I was no longer the son who kept quiet to keep her comfortable. I could feel something new growing inside me. Not just anger but determination. If she wanted war, I was ready to take up arms. Friend, how do you like Mom's answer? Is this just cruelty, or an attempt to teach the hero? Write in the comments. How would you react to such a response? Share our story with your friends. The chat continued unabated. Lauren took off another sticker, this one with popcorn, as if she was watching a comedy. Aunt Linda wrote, "Well, if he's so worried, let him talk to someone." Her concern was like poison served with a smile. Tyler added, "Bro, record more voicemails. I'm already a fan of your whining." Uncle Rick chimed in. Maybe he should go to the theater? Such a talent for drama. Their words were like needles. Each prick didn't kill, but together they made me a target that could be kicked forever. Grandma wrote again, "Honey, don't be offended. Mom wants the best for you." I closed the chat, feeling the laughter getting stuck in my throat. Kindness? Mom didn't mean well. She wanted control. She wanted everyone to see how problematic I was, so that Lauren would shine brighter, so that her own shadows would go unnoticed. I remembered how she always smiled when she was praised for her perfect family. "Lauren is my pride," she said, and of me she added, "He's complicated, but we're getting through it." Now she's shown everyone that I'm not just complicated. I'm a mistake that needs to be ridiculed. I called Jack, a friend, who forwarded my voicemail messages to my mom. "Why did you do that?" I asked, my voice quieter than I wanted it to be. He hesitated. I thought she would help. "I'm sorry, I didn't know she was like that." I hung up without listening to the rest. His sorry was empty like Mom's emojis. I trusted him, and even if he didn't mean to, he gave Mom a gun. I felt naked in front of everyone. In front of Lauren, in front of my aunt, in front of the chat that turned my pain into a joke. But I wasn't going to remain their meme. I knew Mom had her secrets. She was always careful, but not perfect. And I decided that I would find them. Not for revenge, but for justice. If she wanted to make me look weak, I'll show that weakness is not my vocal cords. Weakness is hiding your sins behind someone else's back. Friends, what do you think about the hero's decision to seek the truth? Is this justice or a step towards escalation? Write in the comments, how would you start digging after this? Support our podcast to find out what's next. I lay down on the sofa, staring at the ceiling, and thought about how my family had become not a home for me, but a cage. Lauren, mom, aunt, uncle. They all played a game where I was a pawn that could be thrown off the board. But I didn't want to be a pawn anymore. I didn't know what I was going to find, but I knew I wasn't going to stop. Mom wanted me to be her meme, her shadow, her excuse for Lauren. But I was going to become something else. A person who speaks, not keeps silent. A man who is not afraid of the truth, even if it burns. And I was ready to find this truth, so that it would burn not only me. Friends, how do you like the transformation of the hero? Is this the beginning of strength, or the road to loneliness? Write in the comments, how would you feel in his place? Subscribe so you don't miss the sequel. After my family made me a meme, and my mom refused to remove my voicemails from the chat, I realized that I would no longer be her good son. She wanted me to be a shadow of her perfect Lauren, so that my weaknesses would serve as a backdrop for her triumphs. But I'm tired of bending over. Her words, the family should know who they're dealing with, burned like acid, and I decided it was my turn to show them who they were dealing with. I knew Mom had secrets. She was always a master of masks. She smiled at Dad, praised Lauren, joked with Grandma, but her phone was like a safe, which she guarded better than her feelings. I wasn't looking for revenge when I reached into her old iPad, which was once mine. I was looking for justice. And I found her, a correspondence with a man named Brian, whom she wrote down as Svetlana Accounting. The messages were like dynamite. I think about you when my husband is around. Lauren is the only light in my family. I've been putting up with the rest for a long time. I took the screenshots right away. Not for revenge, but for the truth. It was my ticket out of the shadows. Not just proof of her lies, but a weapon that could even the score. I noticed this iPad a couple of months ago when my mom left it in the kitchen. She rarely used it, but I knew that her iCloud was still attached to it. She had never been strong in technology. I didn't think much of it at the time, but after her attack in the chat, everything changed. I no longer saw her as a mother who was worried. I saw a man who used my pain to strengthen his throne. I waited until she went into the shower, took the iPad and opened the messages. At first, nothing, regular chats with friends, spam from stores. But then I found the contact Svetlana Accounting. The name looked suspiciously like a cheap alias from a spy movie. I opened the correspondence and my fingers froze. "You're so passionate," Brian wrote. "I think about you when my husband is around," my mother replied. "Lauren is the only light in my family. I've been putting up with the rest for a long time," she added in another message. I read, and every syllable was like a hammer blow. She didn't just cheat on Dad. She despised all of us except Lauren. Me, Dad, Grandma, Aunt, everyone who was her ideal family in public. Friends, how do you like the opening of the hero? Is this a fair move or overkill? Write in the comments. Would you delve into the secrets of your loved ones after this? Subscribe to find out what's next. I flipped through the correspondence, and each message was like a new layer of poison. "You make me alive," my mother wrote. "Our meetings are my secret oasis," she added. I could feel the rage mixing with something cold, almost mechanical. It wasn't just cheating. It was her truth, naked and ugly. She was building a different life while pretending to be the perfect wife and mother. And she made me look like a weakling, so that no one would look at her cracks. I remembered how she smiled at Dad at dinner, how she hugged me in front of the guests, how she praised Lauren, calling her her pride. It was all a lie, and I was a fool who believed in her love. I took screenshots, my fingers trembled, but not from fear, from determination. It wasn't just dirt. It was a bomb that could blow up her facade. I saved them in a separate folder, named Truth, and closed the iPad, feeling my heart beating in my throat. I didn't know what I was going to do with these screenshots. Part of me wanted to rush into the chat and dump them right now so everyone could see who their perfect mom was. But the other part, the one that still remembered how she baked pancakes for me as a child, whispered, "Stop." I was sitting on the couch, staring at the black screen of my phone, and trying to figure out where the sun ends and the man who wants justice begins. I remembered how Lauren threw a clown sticker, how Uncle Rick called me a crybaby, how Mom watched it like a show. They were all playing her game where I was the target. But now I had a gun, and I could change the rules. I didn't want revenge. Revenge would be too petty. I wanted them to see the truth, so that Mom could feel what it's like when your secrets become public domain. Friends, what do you think about the hero's doubts? Is it a weakness or a strength to stop and think? Write in the comments. How would you deal with such a choice? Share our story with your friends. I called Jack, a friend, who forwarded my voicemail messages to my mom. Did you know what she would do? I asked, my voice like a taut string. He hesitated. No, dude, I thought she was going to talk to you. I'm sorry, I screwed up. I was silent, listening to his breathing on the phone. His sorry was sincere, but it was useless. He gave Mom the bullets, and she fired without hesitation. Just stay out of it, I said and hung up. I wasn't mad at him. He was a pawn just like me, but I didn't trust anyone anymore. Mom taught me that even the closest ones can betray, and I learned this lesson better than I wanted to. I opened the chat to check if she had deleted her voicemails. They were still there, like a trophy of her victory. Lauren threw off a new popcorn sticker, as if she was waiting for the second act. Aunt Linda wrote, maybe he'll just outgrow it? Their taunts continued, and I realized that they wouldn't stop until I forced them. I was thinking about Dad. He was silent as always, but I knew he'd seen the voicemails. I imagined him sitting in his room, reading the chat, and not knowing what to say. He never argued with my mom, even when she compared me to Lauren. She wants the best, he would say when I complained. But now I saw that her best was Lauren, and he and I were just decorations. The correspondence with Brian wasn't just her secret. It was proof that our whole family was a lie. I didn't want to hurt him, but I couldn't keep quiet. If I upload screenshots, he'll know the truth. And Mom finds out that her throne is built on sand. I closed my eyes, feeling my determination overcome my doubts. It wasn't revenge. It was justice, and I was ready to bring it. Friends, how do you like the hero's decision to dig deeper? Is this the path to truth or destruction? Write in the comments. How would you use such a compromise? Support our podcast to find out what's next. I was lying on my bed, staring at the ceiling, and thinking that family wasn't what I thought it was. These are not warm dinners, not general jokes, not grandma's dumplings. It's a game where everyone wants to be taller, and I was the pawn that Mom sacrificed for Lauren. But now I had a trump card. The screenshots were in my phone like a loaded gun, and I knew that sooner or later I would pull the trigger. Not for the sake of pain, but for the sake of light. Because the truth is not her toy. This is my fire, and I was going to light it so that no one was left in the shadows. Friends, how do you like the transformation of the hero? Is this the beginning of freedom or the road to solitude? Write in the comments. How would you feel with such a weapon in your hands? Subscribe so you don't miss the sequel. When I found my mom's correspondence with Brian, I realized that I was holding not just a secret in my hands, but a nuclear bomb. Her messages: I think about you when my husband is around. Lauren is the only light in my family. We're not just cheating. It was her truth, naked and poisonous, which showed that our whole family, her husband, me, and grandmother, were just a backdrop for Lauren. After she leaked my voicemails into the chat, turning me into a family meme, I no longer wanted to be her pawn. She wanted me to be weak, for Lauren to shine, for no one to look at her cracks. But I decided that was enough. I uploaded screenshots of her correspondence to the same family chat, without words, without comments, just the truth as it is. And this time it wasn't me who came out. Mom left the chat in silence. An hour later, a new chat appeared, where everyone was except me. And besides Dad, Lauren texted me, "You're crazy." I replied, "No, he's just not a convenient son anymore." It was not the end, but the beginning, the moment when I stopped being their victim and became the one who speaks. I stared at the screenshots for a long time before clicking send. My finger was hanging over the screen, as if I was holding a grenade with the pin pulled out. The part of me that still remembered Mom's hugs, her pancakes in the morning, whispered, "Don't do this." But the other part, The one that remembered Lauren's clown sticker, Uncle Rick's words, "You're such a crybaby," and Mom's family needs to know who they're dealing with, was stronger. I didn't want revenge. Revenge is when you want pain. I wanted justice, so that they could see who she really is. I opened the chat, where my voicemails were still hanging like a trophy of her victory. Lauren recently sent a gif of popcorn. Aunt Linda wrote, "He's going to outgrow it." They were still laughing, as if I was their personal show. I selected the screenshots, 3 messages where Mom wrote about Brian and about patience with us, and sent them. Without words, the screen blinked, and I exhaled, as if I dropped a ton of bricks from my shoulders. Friends, how do you like the hero's move? Is this justice or is it too cruel? Write in the comments, would you have taken such screenshots or stopped? Subscribe to find out what's next. The silence in the chat was deafening. 5 minutes. 10. I stared at the screen, feeling my heart beating in my throat. Uncle Rick was the first to react, a sticker with an exploding head. Then Grandma wrote, "What is it?" Her words were like a scream in the void. Aunt Linda replied, "Is this a joke?" Tyler, who usually spammed memes, was silent for the first time ever. Dad wrote, "Call me." I saw his status change to offline, and realized that he was reading the correspondence. Mom left the chat after a minute, without a single word. I waited for her to call, text, burst in screaming, but she just disappeared. An hour later, Aunt Linda created a new chat. I found out from my grandmother. "Everyone is there except you and your father," she said, her voice trembling. I grinned, feeling bitterness mingle with satisfaction. They tried to wipe the truth like dust off a shelf, but the truth wasn't dust. She was a fire that I had lit, and it was already consuming their facade. Lauren texted me, "You're crazy. Why did you do that?" Her words were like a blow, but I was ready. "You threw a clown sticker when Mom leaked my voicemails," I replied. "I just showed you who the real clown is." She sent, "You've ruined the family." I wrote, "No, he's just not a convenient son anymore." She didn't answer, but I knew she was fuming, like Mom, like their whole team, who were used to me being silent. I remembered how Lauren was always my mom's star, how she got away with her moods, how my mom said, "She's strong, not like you." Now I've shown that their power is a lie built on my bones. I didn't feel guilty. I could feel the shadow that I was starting to dissolve under the light of truth. Friends, what do you think about Lauren's reaction? Is she protecting her mom or herself? Write in the comments, how would you respond to her "You're crazy"? Share our story with your friends. I was thinking about Dad. His "call me" was hanging in the chat like an unexploded bomb. I knew that he had seen the screenshots. I knew that he was reading Mom's words about Brian, about patience for him. I didn't want to hurt him, but I couldn't keep quiet. He was part of this game. His silence when Mom compared me to Lauren, his "we'll talk later" when she leaked my voicemails were complicity. I dialed his number, but it didn't ring. What could I say? "I'm sorry for telling the truth," or "It's your fault too"? I wasn't ready for this conversation, but I knew it was inevitable. Dad wasn't an enemy, but he wasn't an ally either. He was a man who preferred not to see, so as not to destroy his world. But I destroyed it for him. Aunt Linda wrote to me personally, "You acted cruelly. It's none of your business." I replied, "My voicemails weren't your business either, but you were laughing." She didn't answer, and I felt the corners of her lips twitch in a smile. They're used to me bending over, apologizing, disappearing. But I was no longer the son who hid so as not to upset them. I remembered how my mother smiled when she was praised for her perfect family. "Lauren is my pride," she said, and of me she added, "He's complicated." Now I've shown that it's not me who's the problem, but her lies. The new chat without me and Dad was their attempt to rewrite reality. But I knew that the truth would not be erased. It's like a fire. It burns, but it illuminates. Friends, how do you like Dad's silence and the new chat? Is this an attempt to save face or cowardice? Write in the comments, how would you react to such an exception? Support our podcast to find out what's next. I was lying on my bed, staring at the ceiling, and thinking that family wasn't what I thought it was. These are not warm dinners, not general jokes, not grandma's dumplings. It's a game where everyone wants to be taller. And I was the pawn that Mom sacrificed for Lauren. But now I was a gambler, The screenshots were my move, and I could see their board cracking. Mom came out, Lauren was angry, Aunt was writing, Dad was silent. They all felt that I was no longer a shadow. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to stop. If they wanted a show, I'll give them an ending they won't forget. Not for the pain, but for myself. Because I'm no longer the one who keeps quiet to keep them comfortable. I am the one who speaks, and my truth is louder than their lies. Friends, how do you like the transformation of the hero? Is this a strength or a step towards a break? Write in the comments. How would you feel after such a move? Subscribe so you don't miss the finale. When I uploaded screenshots of my mom's correspondence with Brian to the family chat, I knew that this was not just a move in the game. It was my way out of it. Mom made me a meme. Lauren threw stickers with clowns, the family laughed, and I was their shadow, their loser. But I didn't want to be their victim anymore. I showed them the truth. Her words about Brian, that she tolerates all of us except Lauren, and the chat exploded. Mom came out, created a new one without me and Dad. Lauren called me a psycho. The family turned away, as if I was a virus that needed to be isolated from. But I didn't regret it. For the first time in my life, I felt freedom, not the kind that comes from likes or praise, but the kind that comes when you choose yourself. I stopped being the one who gets laughed at, the one who stays silent for the sake of comfort. I became the one who speaks, who knows his worth. They saw me as a problem because I was no longer their pawn. And that was my victory. A month has passed since that day, and the family chat, the new one, without me, has become their refuge, where they pretended that nothing had happened. Aunt Linda posted pictures of her pies. Tyler spammed with memes, Grandma sent flower stickers. I knew this from Jack, my friend, who was still in their chat. They're pretending that you don't exist, he said, and I grinned. They could have erased me from the chat, but not from reality. Mom didn't call, didn't write, didn't try to explain herself. Lauren sent another message. Are you happy? Dad doesn't talk to her. I didn't answer. Her words were like a prick, but I was no longer a target. Dad called once, his voice was quiet, almost broken. Why are you doing this? I said, I have shown the truth. Would you like not to know? He was silent, then hung up. I didn't blame him. He was a hostage to her lies just like me. But I wasn't going to be a hostage anymore. Friends, how do you like the choice of a hero? Is it freedom or selfishness? Write in the comments. Would you choose yourself or your family after this? Subscribe to discuss the finale. I began to look at my family with different eyes. I used to think that family meant warm dinners, shared jokes, and grandma's dumplings. But now I saw that it was an arena where everyone was fighting for their throne. Mom wanted to be the queen, Lauren wanted to be her princess, and I was a pawn that could be discarded for their glory. Her vocal cords, that's why Lauren was always stronger. They weren't just an attack. They were her way of keeping me in the shadows. But I turned the board over. The screenshots were my move, and I could see how their game was bursting at the seams. Aunt Linda texted me again. You've ruined everything. Family is sacred. I replied. A saint does not laugh at someone else's pain. She didn't answer, and I felt the corners of her lips twitch in a smile. They're used to me bending over, apologizing, disappearing. But I was no longer the son who hid so as not to upset them. I remembered how Lauren had always been my mom's star. Her whims, I'm a star, got away with it because Mom saw her reflection in it. Lauren is strong, she said, and of me she added, he's complicated. I was difficult because I didn't want to be their backdrop. I was difficult because I was telling the truth when they wanted to lie. Now Lauren was calling me a psycho, but I knew she wasn't mad about Mom. She was angry because I had shown that her throne was also a lie. Mom's correspondence with Brian wasn't just cheating. It was proof that even Lauren was part of her facade. And I got rid of that facade, even if it meant being alone. Friends, what do you think about breaking up with your family? Is it strength or loss? Write in the comments. How would you survive such alienation? Share our story with your friends. I started writing. Not in a chat, not for the family, but for yourself. I started a blog where I talked about what it's like to be a shadow in a family where you can't be heard. I wrote about voicemails, screenshots, and how the truth can be both poison and medicine. People read, commented, and shared. You gave me the courage to speak. I didn't become a star like Lauren, but I became a voice, for myself and for those who know how painful it is when your words are used against you. Jack called, apologized again for sending voicemail messages to Mom. I didn't know she was like that, he said. I replied, forget it. It taught me who to trust. He was the only one left, but I kept him at a distance. Mom taught me that even those close to me can betray, and I didn't want any more wounds. Grandma called a couple of times, her voice trembling. Honey, I'm sorry, Mom. She didn't want to. I said, Grandma, she wanted to. And I can't pretend that I'm not. She was crying and I could feel her pain clinging to me, but I didn't back down. Respect is not about blood, not about a mother. It's about those who don't betray. Mom had betrayed me, betrayed Dad, and I couldn't call her family anymore until she faced the truth. Dad wrote short messages. Are you okay? I replied, yes. I was fine for the first time in my life. I knew who I was, and I knew that I would not let anyone else burn my truth. Friends, how do you like the Heroes blog? Is this a way to cope or a cry for help? Write in the comments, would you start writing after that? Support our podcast to discuss. Now I'm sitting at my laptop, drinking coffee and writing a new post. Not about Mom, not about Lauren, but about how to find yourself when the family becomes the enemy. I'm no longer the kind of son you can burn and forget. I am a man who knows the price of silence and the price of truth. Mom wanted to make me look weak, but I showed that weakness is hiding your sins behind other people's backs. I don't regret the screenshots. They were my fire, my way of saying, I'm here and I'm not a shadow. The family has turned away, but I am not alone. I have me and that's enough. If someone decides to set my reputation on fire again, I will be ready with the facts, with the truth, with a voice that is no longer silent. I didn't choose a family. I chose myself and it was the best bet of my life. Friends, how do you like the ending? Has the hero found himself or lost too much? Write in the comments, how would you end such a story? Thank you for being with us and see you to new stories.